What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and today we're doing something a little different than normal. Perhaps the most common question I get deals with what I would rank A grinder versus B grinder as. Like, is this better than that, or which one would you take between these three grinders? So I thought it would be nice to do a video where I kind of cover all of that. Now the approach I'm going to use is similar to that of Jeff Nippard, if anyone's familiar with that other YouTuber who does fitness kind of videos. He will do a breakdown from S to A, B, C, D, kind of grading different workouts. And so in the same way, I'm going to be utilizing that structure and doing it for grinders. So I'll be assessing these grinders with a specific grade based off of my own experience. And of course, I'm gonna have some criteria that I'll be basing these grades off of. The sound, so whether or not it's a pleasant sound, high pitch, whatever it might be. The taste that the grinder actually produces, I think is a very important one, though incredibly subjective. Workflow, so how it is to work with the grinder, if it's an easy thing, if it's enjoyable to use, if it's a nuisance, retention, using bellows, things like that. The aesthetic, this is a very small part, but I do think it's something that is part of that enjoyability, something that, you know, it does have a big footprint, is it small? Of course we have speed, so is it taking a minute long to grind the coffee up, or is it like 5 seconds? Is it a nuisance to sit around and wait for? I'm also gonna talk about flexibility, whether or not we have the capability of, you know, doing different burrs, or with in some cases, different augers, if we're able to switch around with other third-party accessories to see what the flexibility is with one specific grinder. I'm also taking into account the range of the grinder, so if it can do filter and espresso, how well it can do them both, if it only does one or the other. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, I'm going to be taking a look at the price. So having that taken into account with these gradings is very important to understand, because you could have a great grinder that is $4,000, but it may not be as good for the price point and everything else as something that's $200. I picked about 30, 35 grinders, somewhere around there, and we're gonna just briefly go through them, and I'm gonna try to rapid through it. If I feel like something needs a little explaining, I'll explain it, but anyway, let's get going. The first one I'll be grading is the Baratza Vario, which this was kind of a legendary grinder for a long time, and I still think is a very good grinder. It is something that produces incredible coffees, especially if you put in those didding steel burrs inside. The ceramic burrs do a really nice job for big bodied espressos, but if you want something that's both for filter and for espresso, those diddings are where it's at. Nowadays, with a lot of the competition coming out, it has bumped down a few grades, whereas originally I might have given it an A. It now is sitting more at a B. It's really faffy to mess around with the dial settings. It's very small, it takes a while to grind, but it would maybe be a C because of how faffy it is and the retention and the different things along those lines. But because the customer service of Baratza, especially if you're in North America, is so incredible and they want to make sure your grinder lasts forever, in that price range of around $600, I'm giving this a B. Next is the Urbanic 070. Now, early on in my YouTube career, I did a video with all these under $200 flat burr grinders, and so I'm only choosing one from those, the Urbanics. I feel like it was built the best and was the easiest one for people to get their hands on globally. I still think it does a great job. There are a lot of people who still use them regularly. They're built quite well for that price point. It does filter pretty well. It does espresso really well, and you can switch out and get some other burrs that are on the market. They don't fit all of the 60 mils, but they do a good job. Due to the price point, due to its capability, the range, the flexibility, I'm going to give it a B as well. There are some issues when it gets to multiple shots. It heats up pretty easily. There are some issues with the dial on it that make it a bit less than ideal to get that A score, and so you know, we're situating at a B. Baratza Sette 270, 270 different settings. It has 30 macro, and then you have micro adjustments for each one, which opens it up to 270 clicks. It's a conical burr grinder. It's very loud. The workflow is great. It has very low retention. It comes straight out. It's very, very nice, but it's very plasticky feeling, and the loudness of it just really kills it, and the gearbox is constantly going down. Now, of course, it's Baratza, so you get them replaced very easily. I do really enjoy this grinder for beginners. I think it does a good job, but at the price point, it goes with C. Now, the Sette 30, I'm going to give actually a D. It has all the issues of the 270, but it has only 30 settings, so you're really, really stunted, I should say, when it comes to espresso settings. You have the 30, don't worry, you can get the upgrade ring in order to make it 270 levels, and boom, it'll bump you up a full grade. Next, we have the Niche Zero. I would say 5 years ago, it would probably have been an A because there was nothing really like it on the market. Nowadays, with all the competition, it's dropped a few for me. Swarks has made a $200 or $300 kit where you can switch it to flat burrs, but that essentially doubles the cost of the grinder. At that same price point, there are, I just think, superior grinders on the market, but its workflow is great. It stinks at filter coffee. I've said this many times in the past. You can slow feed it and it gets marginally better. Espresso is very easy to dial in, but it's not to a high standard. I personally believe it is very quiet, but it's also incredibly slow. It has very weak motor overall with 120 watts, but because of the gearbox in there, that should actually last for a long time. So some people may complain about that, but I don't think that's an issue at all. Next, we have the Fellow O Gen 2. I think this grinder does a great job for the price point where it's sitting at around that $300 mark, but you're definitely lessening the lifespan of the motor if you consistently do espresso with it. So because of that, it has to go down a few clicks. Outside of that, I think it is a very solid grinder. It's a great one to jump into. It can hold any of the 64mm burrs, and with Gen 2 and the anti-static, it's raised the bar in a lot of areas. So for those reasons, it will get a B. Next, we have the Bentwood. So the Bentwood is a more end-game style grinder. It's well over $2,000. It's a big honkin' grinder that really showed the world the necessity, really, of having a pre-breaking auger and of having tight tolerances for a really nice alignment. It came out really kind of guns a-blazing on this specific style with blind burrs, just taking into account all of the different things over and throughout history that have made big differences, like Mahlkönig introducing an auger that does pre-break, like blind burrs, and all these different things that have, kind of made splashes throughout history in grinders. They kind of put them all into one thing in order to make a great grinder. It was one of the final designs that Keeber actually designed for the burr prior to his passing, so it's got a really nice burr set in there as well that was specifically made for the Bentwood. Now, it is very inflexible in the sense that it's a 63mm blind burr with back screws. Nothing else fits in it except their burrs. But that being said, you don't really need anything else because it does such a great job at making these sweet, thicker shots that have a really nice acidity presentation. It can do filter and espresso very, very well. They both are fantastic. Is single dosing on it is a bear. It is not made for that. It needs to be hopper fed, and there's a lot of retention due to the massive chamber inside, which does lessen the heating up of the grinder. It does cause quite a bit of retention. And then it's also absolutely massive for a 63mm grinder, so we give it a B on that. Next, we have the Lagom Mini. Now, when this came out, it was kind of hilarious that no one had really thought of this before. They essentially took a hand grinder and they threw it into a stand with a motor. It's kind of like they took the idea from Motor Dante, which I think they've changed their name to like Grind Buddy or something, which is just a motor for a Commandante, and they just made it into an integrated platform at around a $400 price tag. That price is quite steep, which will knock it down a bit because for something that small, I don't think it should be that expensive. It is built pretty well. The issue, it does have quite a bit of stalling, but it makes really nice espresso and filter coffee for what it is. It does take a long time to grind, but the sound isn't bad. I'm going to kind of give that a B as well. Next, we have the Mahlkönig X54. They're known for commercial machines, E80s, their Peaks, which we all know about the Peak, with their EK43s, etc., but they wanted to enter that home market, so they made a 54mm grinder. Now, this one, it was kind of a letdown when it came out. It wasn't anywhere near the build quality of their commercial machines, which I understand, but at the original price point it came out at, which was close to $800, it was a big letdown. They did end up dropping the price quite a bit, but even still, there are a lot of issues with the dial itself. A lot of people have stripped issues there. I had some issues with my own. The burrs on it are a bit weird. They tried to have two separate patterns on the two burrs, which can work. I didn't think it worked super well for a wide variety of different styles of coffees. And also the dialing system itself is just not very wide. So there's some issues with it that I wish we could get around. If you have it as a dedicated espresso grinder that's hopper fed, it's fine. And capability of doing single dosing, and due to it being 54 and the dial being weird, I'm going to give this one a C. Next up, we've got the Eureka Specialita. Now, this one's kind of legendary in the field. A lot of people get it because it is made by an Italian company. It's really high quality build. There's a lot of issues with it as well, though. The alignment's never that great, and the retention is really bad. And the dial is pretty terrible on it. But if you are looking for an espresso-only grinder that does great for medium to dark roasted coffees, the Specialita is fantastic. Because it can't do filter, because it doesn't have flexibility, and because they have weird-sized burrs where you can't even put in those ditting burrs that I love into it due to the weird sizing that they decide to do for proprietary burr sizes, whatever. This gets a C. Next up, we have the Eureka Oro Mignon. In all reality, it's a very similar story to the Specialita. They went bigger with 65mm burrs, but you have that kind of inflexibility issue. You also have the same issue with the dialing in. There are mods to make it better, but who wants to mod a brand new $800 grinder? Not me. So for all those reasons, similar to the Specialita, it also will be getting a C grade. Next, we'll talk about the Turin SD40, which, as we know, is a Chinese-made grinder that a lot of companies around the world buy and slap their logo on. This one is very cheap. It's under that $300 mark. It's got a small burr set, like I believe it's I think it's 38mm conical burrs in there. Grinds pretty quickly. It does very, very okay at filter, better than the niche does at the filter size. But with these cone burrs, especially with the faster spinning cone burrs, they really suffer in the filter range. It does espresso quite well, especially with higher acidity presentations. The noise isn't terrible. It's really small, so it's got a nice little footprint. It does need bellows, as does a lot of these. They really all do. I would prefer the SD40 personally to the niche due to the fact that I think it just tastes better for me and my palate. But I think that in the areas where it goes well, the niche does worse. And in areas where the niche does well, this one does worse. So I put them roughly on the same plane. And same with the Baratza Sette 270. All of those getting roughly a C grade. Next, I've got the Fembook A68, which is that 68mm conical burr grinder from Fembook that I made a video on, as with all these other grinders. This one I was very surprised with, very impressed with. It had low retention, very easy to disassemble. The alignment was pretty solid, and it did a great job for filter and espresso. Some little concerns that I had with the assembly altogether, but due to the fact that I've used it for as long as I have, and I've had it for quite a while at this point, and it's still kicking it out of the park, I'm going to give this an A grade. I think this is a great grinder at its price. It's compact and it's easy to kind of mess around with. So I quite like it. I think the aesthetic's nice and it's a small footprint. Next up, Weber Workshop's EG1. Now this grinder costs about, well, the black one that I have is $4,250 US. The silver one I think is like $3,750. I guess turning it black makes it $500 more expensive. So there's no way this is getting an S, because in order for something over $2,000 to get an S tier, it would need to be so far above everything else ever made that it's just like mind-blowing. The experience, it's the most enjoyable grinder for me so far out of all the grinders I've owned and used. For all the testing I do, I always end up using a higher quality grinder because I need something that won't overheat and all these things, and it just does a great job with retention, holding its grind. I really enjoy this, the step mechanism on this. It's 5 microns per, but a lot of this is very subjective. I think for a lot of people, this would be a B, and honestly, if I stepped out of my own personal bias and looked at it, it might be a B, but because I think that the way it's built and the alignment, which a lot of people, I think, are just wrong on their assessment of the alignment, but the flavor that comes out of it, the ULF burrs, the core burrs, which are fantastic, and then all the new 80mm options that Hansung has been working on from SSP, the flexibility, I'm giving it an A for me and myself. I love the EG1, and I'm not shy about that. Next, we have the Timemores. So we have 4 here to kind of look at. The 078, the 078S, 064, 064S. The 078, just, you know my thoughts on it. I think it's one of the best filter grinding coffees on the market, but it's just that filter because it has those hybrid burrs inside. I love the look. I love the aesthetic. I think it's built really well. 400 watt BLDC motor. If it was capable of maintaining that incredible filter and doing espresso well, maybe it would go to A or even S, potentially due to the price. It's pretty cheap for what it is, but there's no other burrs on the market that fit it except the 078S, so we're going to stick the stock at a B. The 078S, I think, is fantastic. The filter is fine that comes from it, but there's no other burrs on the market that really fit it. It doesn't do well enough at espresso for it to be A, standing on the merits of the espresso alone. And the filter is nowhere near as good as the 078 to be able to, like, knock it up a tier either. So apparently Hansung from SSP is making burrs for it that might knock it up because the flexibility will be there to kind of push it up a little higher. I'm going to give both of those B scores, even though I think the filter on the 078 is incredible. 064 does a good job at the price point of around $450 or whatever it is now. It is flexible in that you can put in other burrs, but the stock version with those hybrids, you can't, so we're going to keep that at a B. But when you look at the 064S, That one, you can do filter and espresso. It has that auger that pre-breaks, which so do the others. I think the workflow is really nice. I enjoy the fines catcher that you can, discard for after you grind. The nice motor, the footprint, the build quality can fit in any of those 64mm burrs, but right out of the box, it can do both espresso and filter quite well. So that one actually will get an A from me. And if you were able to get any of these four at the Kickstarter price, that maybe even goes up a full grade for all of the models because those prices were crazy. Next up is the Baratza Encore ESP. Now this I'm going to give an A for, and the reason is because it's under $200, like $199. It has an incredible adjustment dial that I think is ingenious. You can do espresso granular range from 1 to 20, and then once you get above that, the thread pitch increases so that you have bigger spacing between the filter grind settings. Being Baratza, you're going to have the awesome customer service, so I give this an A when you take into account the price and everything else. Of course, globally it may not be the same, but I do know that they're planning on expanding a lot more rapidly. Next is a fellow Opus. This is a similar price point to the Encore. It has a similar target market, but I think this one failed in a lot of areas, especially with the dial-in, but also I'm not a fan of how it feels. It feels super cheap, cheaper than the Encore feels. And so for all of those reasons, the sound and everything else, I'm giving this one a C. Next, we have the Varia VS3. A lot of people absolutely love this grinder. I think it's largely because it's a really low RPM conical, which makes dialing in easy, and it doesn't have as much of that heat damage and issues that higher RPM grinders with the mushing and the fines production, etc., that those higher RPMs give. But there have been loads of reports of the motor having issues. I know they've been fixing that and changed it, but I still see a lot of negative reports of issues with their grinders not being really, fixed in the best way possible. This has been on a lot of forums. You can check me on that. But I do think it does a good job with both filter and espresso. If there were absolutely no issues on any forum post or ever of any of these problems that seem to be more occurring than other grinders, it might be an A, but because of these issues, I feel most comfortable giving it a B. Next, we have the Zerno Z1. I've not been shy about what I think about this grinder. I think it's fantastic. I think what Vel is doing in Chicago is incredible with the build quality and with the approach to creating it and the size, the aesthetic, everything about it is absolutely incredible. I do think it's quite expensive, and getting one is very difficult because they do them in drops. And because that's such a difficult thing, I'm going to give it an A instead of an S. Next, we have the Kopi Concepts. This one on paper was a really exciting prospect being an F1 engineer, but there were so many issues that weren't really taken care of. The price point that had to keep going up to make up for the cost of the materials and just the underwhelming performance gives that a C. Next, I have the Olympia grinder. So if you bought it strictly for an Olympia Cremina or a similar sized espresso lever style machine, it does a great job, but it's so myopic in the sense that it can only do that the way the grinder is made. The dial is not very good. There's some issues with how it was built, but the quality of it's incredible as far as the quality of materials used. It'll last forever. I know that they mostly sell this as a companion for their machines, and if that's what you're getting it for, it probably is closer to an A. Now we have kind of the DF series. So these are, again, kind of like the SD. You have this company in China that makes these grinders. People buy them and then sell them themselves under like a private label, essentially. The DF64 Gen 2, I think, is fantastic for the money. There are, some build issues. There's alignment issues with it. But overall, I think it's a great purchase. I'm going to give it a B. I'm not going to give it an A just because it is still a horizontal grinder, which I have, I'm like, at that price point, it should do something like what the Gevi Grindmaster or the Timemore does with the auger, and I think that'll greatly improve the taste as well as the longevity of it. But DF64E and the P, I give both of those Ds because I hate the dialing mechanism at the bottom. It's only for espresso. It has a very tiny window for dialing in, and the way it's built with that grind mechanism on the bottom makes it a pain to kind of open up and change around. The DF64V is getting a C. The reason it's downgraded from the DF64 Gen 2 is because it does stall. There was a second iteration that went out that wasn't supposed to stall as much, but I still experienced it. It has, and then it has similar issues as the DF64 Gen 2. The DF83, I think, is a good grinder. It is actually a workhorse. It has a very solid motor. It chews through beans, and it does a good job. You can switch between filter and espresso quite easily, but they both have retention issues. You need to use bellows. They're not very attractive, so we'll give that one a B. I do have one of them as an A, and that is the DF83V. I think this one is a departure from everything they have done. They added an auger feeding system into this one. They have it at an angle, variable speed, so you can play around with things, and I personally didn't experience stalling with this grinder. I think for the price, at 83mm millimeters with all the options on the market. It's very flexible, very easy to use. I really enjoyed the DF83V. Next, we have the P100 from Option O. Now, this one is not really being marketed and sold anymore because they've moved to the Lagom 01, but I know that some people still, talk about this grinder. I have to use a hair dryer or a heat gun to get the top burr out because it gets stuck. The taste of it compared to other 98 millimeter grinders, and then the look of it kind of falls to a C grade. From what I hear about the 01, it might be up at the A, definitely a B if not an A grade, but at this price point of about, $3,000 or whatever I paid for it, I just expect a bit more. I know a lot will disagree who own it, but of course that's, it is what it is. When people own something, they want it to be the best, and this is my opinion yet again. We don't have to agree. Next up, we have the Gevi Grindmaster 64mm. They did a great job listening to the feedback of the people they sent them out to. I was not one of those people. I do not give feedback on things like that. I think they did a really nice job honing in on that market, a similar one to the Timemore 064S. Because they have that weird built-in scale and that's increasing the price just a bit, it maybe would be an S. That plus the fact that I hate the feeling of the dial. It's like metal on metal. I'm going to actually drop it to an A, which okay, it's still an A. I think it's fantastic, but I do prefer personally the Timemore 064S with the little fines clicker and the build of it and the dial on it. I just think it feels better overall. The WUG 2, it's the most flexible grinder on this list. It can do cones, it can do flats, it can do 83 flats, 80 flats, it can do blind flats, it can do 83 cones, 71 cones, and so you can change it out willy-nilly. It is a fantastic grinder. The alignment's superb, which is hard to do with the system that it uses, which is a really long axle coming down. It's hard to keep that aligned, but it's a wonderful grinder. I really like it. It's just kind of a bear in the workflow, which again, I know they've been fixing with future iterations. Next is the Niche Duo, which is 83mm. I compared it to the DF83. I think it does a good job. I don't think it's stellar. The coffee coming out of it wasn't as good as that of the DF83V, which for me kind of knocks it down a bit. I'm a little sketched out by the way that the burr changing system is with all the plastic inside and with the really weak motor at 120 watts. It's the same motor as in the Niche Zero. Yes, they have the planetary gearbox and there's no issue cutting through things now, but who knows how long that motor is going to last if you use it consistently. That's speculation. I'm obviously admitting that. I still think it's a great buy, especially at the price point. It's kind of annoying, some of the rules they have with their burr sets, but it is what it is. Next is the Monolith Max 2. This is a $3,600 grinder. It's impossible to get an S because it's not the greatest thing in the world. It isn't. I do love the grinder though, and I'm going to give it an A. I think that there are qualms in the workflow that really frustrate me with the retention, which is a big one, and then how slow it is with the 400 RPM. But for me, I enjoy using my Kafatek Monolith. This is like the EG1, where if I were fully objective, looking at the retention, looking at some of the issues, it might be more of a B. But because I love using it so much, I'm giving, and then the pre-breaker system they added with the newest model, I am going to give it an A. Finally, EK43, very expensive, around that $3,000 mark. It does not get an S, it does not get an A, it doesn't even get a B. I'm going to give this a C, and it's because how often they come with issues out of the box. The alignment issues, the single dosing is kind of difficult on it, the messy issues, that massive big plastic spout on the bottom, the espresso grind range, all of those just... There's a lot of issues with it. So even though it's built like an absolute machine and it's fantastic for commercial environments, especially if you're using it for batch brew and pour overs, there are just too many issues for it to get any higher than a C at that price. That being said, it is my dedicated cupping grinder, and I love mine, but I have a really good one that I've put a lot of work into. That is my tier system. I tried to speed through it because I knew this was going to be a long video with all the grinders that I ranked. So please let me know what you think about videos like this. If you want me to do this for hand grinders or for different types of espresso machines. Obviously not all espresso machines. We'd need to do like, ones over $2,000 or lever machines specifically or whatever it might be. But if you enjoy this kind of me approaching it, doing things from videos I've done or machines I've used, I would love to know down below your thoughts on this style of video. Is it helpful? Did you enjoy it? Does this open up new avenues? Is this something you would like to see more of? So please let me know. Check out my Patreon where, I give away a lot of these machines through competitions. Next will be like the Aram and maybe a couple of other different small espresso machines like that, the Hewlett Hue Espresso, and after that maybe a Breville espresso machine, and maybe some of the Baratza grinders. There's so many things that need to be gone. So check out my Patreon and join the Discord that we have through that. But other than that, you know, hit the like and subscribe. All that stuff really helps the channel. But thank you so much for watching. Again, your comments mean the world to me. Your support is awesome. If I said something rude or gave your grinder a lower grade, just remember this is my opinion. If you like your grinder, that is very valid, and I don't care. That's great. This is my opinion. So anyway, I hope that you brew something tasty today, regardless of the grinder and the tier or the grade that I gave it, and cheers.